good morning, good morning, good morning. There's a character in England that I'm seeing a lot of, Tommy Robinson. I saw him on Piers Morgan and Piers and the female presenter are kind of labelling him with inciting violence by claiming or by quoting direct quotes from the Quran that incite violence onto Christians. And this is the end of the line now. The UK elite that have sold every citizen of the UK, that has spread out across the world, concentrating those finances to England, to London. You are sitting in the bones of nations across the world. A lot of times where the people on the ground are the ones trying to have a different strategy. But the call for more from London was always there. And now I've seen the strings that are pulled from that shithole by those elites outward to the world to appease their never-ending hunger and thirst for more resources and more control and more power. And then you are the people preventing naturally born citizens of that region from defending themselves with words. There's a quote, I'm not going to exactly know what it was, from Winston Churchill that said, "At some point in the future we may be under attack and the sons and daughters of our great empire will come to our rescue." Well, here we fucking are. Sorry for the swear word. I've been down in the fucking colonies for a long time, Piers. Even people like Nigel Farage. This UK centrism, those buildings were not built with the resources from that tiny little island. Either of you. They were built from an empire that still stands here, that still stands somewhat in Canada. But why? Loyalty, something like that? I'm now sitting on, I'm in the lodges of someone whose family has fled from East London because of this nonsense for now years. So whereas I should be a peer here, I should be a lord in Australia, but that was seen to be too much power abroad, was it? But then that whole system is kind of turned on its head. So I'm guessing there are some established lords and peers that hold authority in that land that perhaps might see it in their best interests to extend that title outward of the island of Britain to stabilise our heritage. I am constantly, from year one over here, piped into my ears the importance of Aboriginal sovereignty, and I'm a massive proponent of it. But to what end? Are they going to establish themselves through the same feudal period, through the same elite, whatever, hierarchies of structure and stability? Or are they just put to the top of the pile to appease someone's ideology that does not make sense? Any type of attempt to explain any of this phenomenon, we have from that island extending here, by my very example, one of the most peaceful cultures and strategies known to man. And that is being thrown in the wood chipper by elites in London, in England, to appease their fantasy and more than likely their cowardice, because they've allowed their country to be overrun. And because they've thrown loyalties to their outward colonial empire allies like myself. They've made the decision that it's in their best interest to appease the wants and the desires of an invading force. I can see it from here. I'm not in England. The security, the national security, the defence strategies here are very different than an urban, built-up environment that has thousands of years of that. It's very different. We won't be in that type of battle here. If I chose to, I really attempted to violently overthrow this government here, I would do it in 2 weeks. But I'm not doing that. I'm not breaking that thread. You are. If you won't defend yourselves there by allowing words, the language, when we're dealing with violence, is going to be violent. That has always been known as the peaceful strategy. If we're using this and not this or this or this in the form of new terrifying drone technology that is the equivalent of the nuclear bomb, I don't for a second imagine that Ukraine couldn't have containers of drones in my fucking city. And the example that's being held up as some type of technological advancement to something deep into Russia, exploding aeroplanes that are used for their defence against plenty of nations that don't include Ukraine, that don't include NATO. If you weaken Russia to a Chinese invasion from the north, or from the east, wherever the fuck China is compared to Russia, then what are you doing? And I'm not coming to Russia's defence. I'm trying to figure out the lay of the land of my own defence. That's legitimacy is held on that island that you are failing to defend for yourselves. Yeah, you can drag someone from a poor background, whatever it is, from a common background that says English words wrong, onto your TV show and parade him around like some type of nitwit, which is what you are doing. But how do you explain? The only way I can explain it is my family has been holding territory on behalf of London, on behalf of England, on behalf of Great Britain and the United Kingdom for 180 years, only to be sold down the river to protect the interests of more than likely an elite class, which media representatives seems to make up a large proportion of these days, that are cowardly looking after their own personal safety. This mass distribution of PR was heightened and specialised by that family, by the royal family. Now, I am in support, I am loyal to that royal family, so I do not wish for the monarchy to fall. But I will put pressure on them to say that, listen, in the form, Charles, of your great uncle, Lord Mountbatten, who specialised in this form of PR, this mass distributed PR, to kind of wash over this empire disintegration that was attempted, whilst countless men, women, children, families were spread out across the entire globe. That singular family decided it was time to start doing PR to protect their interests, not the interests of the United Kingdom. My father, whilst that individual was off making movies about his victories, whilst in the future king's ear about how he should marry a virgin, how he should, that has brought all of this. it is time to take a large step back. I'm sure that the Mountbattens, which is I think what we should start referring to Charles and Camilla respectfully, and William, should take a step back and allow the British Empire, the United Kingdom, the real United Kingdom, to re-emerge on its own. When I actually found out that in response to their outcrops in far-off distant lands forging this citizenship paradigm, the United Kingdom forged its own citizenship paradigm, which prevents me from returning to my historical land, to my indigenous land. And I have individuals from all across the world welcoming everyone to my country while I'm sitting here listening to well-meaning and on the platform, on the stairway up to maybe some type of stability. How long did it take us? Between castles and invasions and kingdoms and feudalism and serfdom and civilization and religion and religious reform, how many hundreds of years are we projecting on Aboriginal elders here with a far different course of strategy, whilst neglecting inheritance of that legacy that is being downsized to appease corporate greed? I have been loyal the entire time to that kingdom. Even in this attempt now, this is loyalty to that kingdom which extends far out beyond that island. In the right hands. With the right foot forward, with the right example. There's a projected image of the UK, of England, of British as this aristocracy, this elite, wealthy class. That is not our history. It is a misinterpretation, it's a misprojected explanation of our history. Kingdoms weren't forged because that was the richest person on the hill. That is looking back with the wrong vision. Kingdoms were created by protection of areas. And if you compare most feudal peasants to nowadays, to most people living in apartments, the peasants were a lot better off. And unfortunately, that reality is just becoming so obviously clear right here, when I am against threats on my life, against everything, trying to create a life for myself that resembles a peasant's life to escape this prison system, this concentration camp, this gulag, installed under the watchful eyes of our so-called king. I appreciate a lot of things that Piers Morgan does. But you're a coward. Let's get a tally of how much the destruction of the wheat belt, which is the state of Western Australia, have a look at it on a map for a second. How much destruction was wrought here and how much of that profit ended up in London to cook up in a massive cauldron this now digital fucking dystopian bullshit attempted to be wheeled in a wheelbarrow and unloaded into a trough for ancestors of probably knights, kings, poets, writers, bishops, priests, dukes, the ancestors of those individuals to lap up and then thank people like Piers Morgan in London for their delicious, nutritious meal. With enough force and enough concentration, I have no doubt in my mind that Australia can become England, hand in hand with the Aboriginal people. If we're allowed to use language to explain the actual circumstance. I have no doubt that if I have enough time with any, even the most advanced Aboriginal elder that is attempting to protect his people and his people's traditions, that once I explain to him the actual game of the field of play he is attempting to enter is not akin to anything of their long, long history. And that weight is falling on his shoulders and being falsely explained. We're not supposed to talk about breeding and about inherited abilities, although how the hell am I doing this if that is not the case? As soon as threatening things really hit the mark, in my environment, I started knowing things that were impossible to know, seeing things that were impossible to see, reliving experiences that were impossible for my lived experience to manifest. Even with this information age, this distribution revolution or renaissance from the internet. I'm not a crazy person swinging my tongue around the air, thinking things. I know the danger I'm in at every point. They say that humans will protect losing something far more than they will to gain something, because I'm in defense right now. I'm not in outward expression, trying to gain more. I'm in defense, and I'm not just in defense of myself. I'm in defense of every single person born truly to that island and that has sent their children, their grandchildren, their sons and daughters out on ships in order to return stability to that island. The courage it will take to explain to this Muslim extreme invasionary force that we will defend these islands that we hold like no other. I will go to wherever. I will do it with whatever weapons. I will invade London with swords. That's what all those books are about. That's what the Quran is written in the paradigm of swords. Not of guns, not of bombs, and certainly not of drones. If I have to assemble the largest force of divorced, rattled men, not war-rattled, divorce-rattled, because that is the war of the elites in London. That is the projected legality, the legal lawfare that is projected around the globe to actually treasonously attack their own citizens, their own rightful heirs to that island. And if that realization bubbles to the surface and action is taken on it, which I'm not encouraging, that's the real battle that men from that region, from that once great empire, are having to battle, is knowing what they should do and not being able to do it. Well, there are ways to do it. I'll draw a border inland of these capital cities projecting out their police state nonsense, appeasing an invasion in a land that isn't here because of a cowardice king and his cowardice son. and his mouthpieces spread out in his great-uncle's example of public relations, all conveniently coming from Germany. Sigmund Freud, Edward Bernays, Lord Mountbatten. Can't even remember his first name. His PR must not have been that good. But all I know is on The Crown he is played by a character that carries my last name. And that the mountain that he falsely claimed was from his heritage sits not far from the mountain in the same area that actually carries my family's heritage. While I sit here and yell into my phone in a colony that has brought more wealth to England than any other. The Western Australian colony, the gold mine. Every intention I have for the Middle East is not to destroy it, not to leave it in ruins, it's to fix it. But why would they believe me when every attempt I make to fix here, the place that actually financed England, that financed Westminster, that financed Buckingham Palace, well, I'm not able to do it here, so why would anyone believe me? Why isn't there finance, considering billions of dollars being spent in this climate change, environmental damage paradigm? Why aren't I being chased down by investors, by finances, by media? Because it's all a load of fucking shit. You built concentration camps, but you built them wrong. There's never going to be the acceptance of that. You need to start walking back. I've given you the script to walk back from. One step back for William into a position that his great-uncle or great-great-uncle held as an advisor to an actual legitimate English king is a pretty good move to make for a German family that kind of floated in on an apple crate. One-to-one scale does not start here. Well, in a way it is. It's starting here. I'm addressing King Charles, I'm addressing Prince William, and I'm saying that they are illegitimately ruling. You'd think that that would warrant a sufficient reply and with a similar manner. I'm sure someone of your staff can find a 10-year-old tablet that you can speak into to reply to me, but you are not. And what does that project outwardly? No wonder the island is under constant attack and invasion, if that is the example set by its head of state. One-to-one scale can start here, and then from here it goes to everything on the ground. You get Tommy Robertson on the ground, one-to-one scale, perhaps behind phones, publicly discussing the issues. You get one street done. You go to the next street, done. You go to the next neighbourhood, done. We're not in India. We're not dividing the country between massive areas that leads to this inevitable war between Pakistan and India that Churchill predicted all those years ago. We're not going to do it like that. We're going to do it street by street. We're going to do it person to person. I've set the example to my children's stepfather who fails to show up, who projects the entire force of the state through a governor ex-police commissioner governor who has brought in a foreign mercenary army to do his dirty work for him and fails to respond in the way that I am projecting out. I'm not standing on the street with a steel helmet on, with guns blazing. I'm talking into my phone. This is the establishment of Western Australia, was established in this order to prevent this. I'm defending this country against the governor, supposedly under or adjudicating the king's wishes here. So where is the response? There isn't one. You've got to really understand history to know what we're doing, and this technological interface has thrown a spanner in all of your minds. You can't understand that this is happening. And every day that I step forward into this, you are one day behind me again on a 4 or 5 year head start that I've already had. My system will meet on the street. And I can imagine a Tommy Robertson, and down 2 doors down the road there is a Muslim mufti or whatever they're called, having this conversation like this, everyone around the street watching, they come to some type of consensus, this goes out, and then from that structure up we will fill Parliament. That's what's going to happen. Because I fucking said it's going to happen. That's what a king does. I'm not saying that I'm the greatest fucking person ever in the world. I'm just a person that had their back against the fucking wall with guns in my face for too long while trying to plant fucking trees. And that just does something to someone. I don't have to sit behind horses and cavalry and everything like that because I sit in my own skin perfectly fine. Something that rulers used to have to do in order to get anything done. We didn't have all these analogues that we could use to project force and project power. Now, don't throw any shade at the structure that did this, because they were born into it. I'm very understanding of that. That's why I'm not saying let's guillotine them in the streets. That's retarded. Look how that ended up in France. In gentlemanly conduct, in sportsmanship, the things that I was taught were British ideals, were English ideals. To lose fairly and to take a step back and humbly admit defeat, that is England. So what better example? I would wish nothing more than for that person doing this to not be me, but it is me. And if there's one thing that we can do to save every single ancestor, every single relative stemming from that island, it is this right now. It is to show sportsmanship from the highest level as example, and then demand that of our subjects. Everybody's trying to do it, but I think it has to be this. It has to be a person basically living as a peasant, homeless, in a far-off, distant land. This is what's happened. This is the mythology of that island that I was born with. It's not a surprise that it's manifesting through my actions. I just hope that the German blood can take a step back and allow the English blood in Charles and William to understand their role within this, respectfully, to provide the stability that they so often speak about. And hopefully in a timely manner. My life is consumed by this, and I assume if any of this actually happens, my life will constantly be assumed, or constantly be consumed by this duty that I wasn't born with. I don't really want it. No one wants it. It just has to be so. And I'll end on like a funny little note that my girlfriend's child, who I am filling a certain role for as a role model, as an example, which I feel terrible because I'm having to commit fully to this project that is so ethereal and so strange that it's hard to put a good example forward to a young boy by doing this, because I'm constantly on this stupid device trying to understand the landscape. I don't want that to be the paradigm. That is what my device is about. I want to be presenting myself properly, but it just doesn't make sense because the pace that this is moving forward, that would be silly. That would be a strategic mistake to put that much effort into my appearance when the appearance is not actually being appropriately responded to. That is my desired paradigm. We get a one-to-one scale device where people do have to rock up well-dressed, well-presented, and I try my best. I just don't have any money to buy nice clothes, you know what I mean? But that individual, that boy who's 8 years old, and I remember when I was 8 years old, he's off playing a hockey game now, a sport that I loved, a sport that my father loved, a sport that my father represented 2 states of Australia in, and I'm unable to go there and watch him play because I'm here talking to the king. I've been unable to watch my own children play their adopted sport of AFL, of Australian rules football, because of the same reason. And that is being thrown at me as negligence of my responsibilities as a father. And that's where I think I can connect to Charles, and that's where I can connect to William perhaps as well, because I know for a fact that their parents' duties spread out across the Commonwealth did take them away from them in the same way. So we're meeting as equals in some manners and far from equals in others. But the conversation needs to be had. And I've made every attempt to make it respectfully, and I've made every attempt to continue with loyalty, and it's up until the point where I'm very, very concerned that a nuclear attack on Great Britain is imminent that leaves me with no choice but to do this. And I believe that this one action can unify and stabilise for a long time. Upwards of 200-300 years, which is what we actually need to repair the damage done in the last 80. Cricket games used to last 5 days and the scores would sometimes be in the 60s and 70s, not in the 500s. By that very example alone, we can see where we've gone wrong. Cricket was purposefully slow, purposefully complicated, because it stimulated our minds that were left in a vacuum of the stability and the peace of the period that it was established. The individuals that support and continue on the traditions from that period in England now are looked at